Hey everybody, this is my 55-gallon Gourami tank, and I have been treating it with ChemiClean to get rid of any cyanobacteria or any unwanted off-walks and surface growth. But what it does not get rid of is algae, and I'm not entirely sure why, but this tank has had an absolute explosion of the maiden's hair, or maiden's tresses rather, I'm sorry, it's maiden tresses is the common name. It's a Spirogyra, it's a filamentous algae, or a hair algae, and it's actually a really pretty algae if seen in the right way, but when it gets out of control, which it does very easily, it's just awful, and it's eating my tank. So I've got to do something about it, and I'm not really sure exactly what I'm going to do just yet. Today we need to get in and do a big water change. I need to get the air stone out of there. You know, like I said, the ChemiClean treatment is over. I think we're probably going to just come in here and remove that bunch of Java fern altogether and just throw that away. I've got so much Java fern in the other room that I'll just replace that, and that'll get rid of a lot of that growth. As far as the stuff that's on the glass, I mean, you can see how thick that is. You can also see that I've got good circulation around the tank. In fact, I've got really good circulation around the power head. You can't even get the algae to grow on the glass right next to it. So I'm probably going to wind up scraping that. I'm not sure. I really hate scraping this stuff because it just puts it into the tank. Even if I do it with a siphon right where I'm scraping and just try to siphon it out as I scrape, then it still just puts it into the tank. And furthermore, it makes it angry. When you damage it, whether you're trying to wipe it out or scrape it out, whatever you're doing in there that's trying to remove it, it produces basically reproductive hormones, and it sends its cell division into overdrive when you do that. So in a sense, you know, I'm kind of joking around, but you also kind of make it angry when you try to clean it up. So as that stuff becomes waterborne, remember, it's algae. A single cell is all that needs to stay in that tank, and it will grow back. Algae is not a macro plant per se. It's a colony plant, and it's made up of single-celled organisms. So it's really tough to get it out of there, and when you scrape it, you really get a lot of it going on in the tank, and it just spreads everywhere. And so I'm really reluctant to do that, but at this point, you know, how much worse can it really get, honestly? So one of the things we need to do while we're in here doing the water change today is I need to take care of the filter. I honestly cannot remember how long it's been since I've cleaned out the canister filter. So it's got to be filthy on the inside. And while a canister filter is not a nitrate trap, as I've heard some people say, as though nitrates will collect in your canister filter, what happens is, as the, I didn't even notice my whiptail catfish is sitting in the bushes up there. I just noticed his little tail sticking down. Interesting, I've never seen him up on the leaves that far. He's usually down lower in the tank where it's darker. But what happens is the, whatever gets picked up in the filter, whether it's fish poop or it's decaying leaves or it's fish food that was uneaten, all of that stuff just gets pulled into the filter. It doesn't get removed from the tank's water. It just gets removed from your sight. It's the same as sweeping garbage under the carpet. Just because you can't see it anymore doesn't mean it's not still in the room. And that's basically what's been going on in my filter. I've just been collecting the crud in this tank for probably, honestly, months at this point. So even if I'm feeding very little every day, or if I cut back on feeding, it doesn't matter. I've got sludge in my filter that is decomposing, and it's just dumping organics into this tank. So I'm not even going to bother with doing a nitrate test. I can already tell you it's just going to be bright red. It's going to be bright red on the other side of the water change, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But let me get on with it. I don't know exactly what we're going to do in here just yet. Like I said, we're going to do a pretty simple before and after. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a look at the filter while I'm in there working on it. We'll just have to wait and see. Alright, so here we are at the filter. I've got all of the top trays out, and all of them had a lot of really nasty stuff in it, but it was really sort of strange. It was a bright green color, very much the color of that cyanobacteria that gets in the tank. It all looked sort of dead and broken up, but it was a really bright green color. So let's have a look. I just poured the rest of the water out. So let's see what this actually looks like. And we're still getting a lot of that really sort of bright green color, but that, ugh, look how nasty that is. That is foul. So that is what was in the bottom of the filter. That was the main physical filter part. All of the rest of it has been my biomaterial. That is actually my oyster grit, or poultry grit. It's crushed egg, or crushed coral and crushed oyster shells, not egg shells. So that gives me a little bit of mineralization in the tank. And then of course these are all my bio balls and sponge filters and all that stuff. So that is what the filter looks like. You think I would put some of my vinyl gloves on to handle that? That is just nasty. So, alright, I'm going to get back to it. Alright, and there's your after. So, big difference, and probably right off the bat you notice that big angelfish right up in the front. One of the things I was getting a little tired of this tank was just sort of looking kind of empty, and I've been having some issues with the angelfish in my 29 miscellaneous, so I decided why not separate them. So I took the big one and I moved it into this 55. So I think we're gonna have a lot better luck with this large one here in this larger tank. I also got in there and I scraped down the glass. I tried wiping it down, but that stuff was just not going anywhere. So I got my razor out and I scraped it all down. I also trimmed a ton of that Java. You can see I just sort of gave it a haircut in the back. I did cut some sections of root off to open it up in the back and allow the water to flow around and circulate more freely. I cleared off the power head, which was all covered in growth, and that allowed a lot more water to move through there more freely. I replaced the Java fern that we talked about right there. I put some nice, fresh, clean, new stuff in. I also cut back a lot of the Java fern that had heavy growth on it, and I gave it a haircut across the front, as you can probably tell, and that allows a lot more room to swim around. It allows a lot more water to flow through the tank. The other thing I did was I added some floating water Sprite back to the aquarium. I used to have it in here a long time ago, and it just never really, I don't know why I took it out, but it never got back in. And that actually helps to diffuse and subdue some of the light before it gets into the tank and really causes a huge amount of algal growth. So all those things in conjunction with each other, and if I kind of go easy on the feeding, I think maybe we might be able to keep on top of it. Another thing I did was I put a bunch of guppies in the tank. I don't know if you've noticed all these swimming around. I did have a few females in here, but I've now added a bunch of endlers. I think they're cobras, and they're probably mixed by now because they came out of this tank, which is basically just full of guppies and endlers and you name it, and it's just been this breeding pool for a long time. So I scooped a big net full out and I put it in this tank. Quite a lot of them are gone already. That angelfish has been making short work of them. So some of the larger ones are still in there, and if you look closely and look around in the vegetation, you'll actually see there's quite a few little guppy fry in the tank too. So I'm hoping the guppies will eat some of that hair algae. I don't know if they really do or not, but I'm hoping they do. And so at this point, my only concern is for my chocolate gourami. They don't like a lot of water movement, and they don't like a boisterous tank or a lot of aggression. And I'm not sure how this angelfish is going to do, you know, being in the tank with some of these other smaller fish. So far, it doesn't seem like he's even paying any attention to them. So I'm not too worried about it. If it's too big for him to worry about eating, then I don't think it's going to be an aggression issue. I think this angelfish is just going to leave him alone. The other thing I've been pondering and considering all day is getting another opaline gourami in here. I've had issues with them in the past. I don't feel like getting into a discussion about the opalines now, but I really love the opalines and the way they look. They're just the worst gourami for trying to keep in a community tank, especially if you've got other smaller, more timid species of gouramis in there. Keeping any of those, it's Trichogaster trichopterus now, I think is what they're officially called. So it's the 3-spot gourami and any of the color morphs, the blue, the lavender, the gold, the opaline. They're all the same species. They're just different paint jobs. And they can be aggressive. I've had issues with them. I used to have a bunch of them in this tank, and one by one they all got killed off by the most aggressive. And so while that would probably make short work of all that hair algae, it would probably just be a headache waiting to happen again if I tried to put another one of them in this tank. So we'll see. I'm looking for something. I want something in here that's going to eat algae better than the fish that I've got in here. You can see this whiptail's tail sticking out. So that's sort of an off-box grazer and should sort of scrape the glass down and keep it clean. But with all that hair algae growing on it, maybe that was just too much for it. Now that we've got a clean start, it'll be able to stay on top of it and keep it clean. There was a rubber lip pleco in this tank, and I'm beginning to think that it's no longer with us because the tank used to be kept really clean, and I just swear by rubber lips for tank cleaners. They're interesting fish in their own right, but if you want something small that's going to be a good tank cleaner, you just can't go wrong with the rubber lips. They're fantastic. So I'm probably going to wind up going out and getting a couple more rubber lips, or maybe some clown plecos. They're small. They do about the same job. And then we'll see what happens in this tank. But it's starting to look better, so we'll get there. Alright everybody, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you're subscribed, and don't forget this is my 55-gallon angelfish tank. Nope, I'm sorry, this is my 55-gallon gourami tank. I'm sitting there looking at that big angelfish and getting confused about what tank I'm looking at. So again, make sure you're subscribed, and this is my gourami tank.